Nisha, my first question that intrigues me and that is going to intrigue the people who are watching us at this point of time is the US-India Business Council Women Lead Initiative. What is it all about? How did you come up with this idea?
Well, Megha, in the course of my career, and particularly in the course of heading the US-India Business Council, I've come across so many extraordinary women, women leaders who have been real pioneers in their field, in their industry, and they have incredible stories and journeys. So, the USIBC Women Lead initiative was really born out of the stories of these inspiring women, and we just felt like we needed to get that out there.
Okay. What inspired you to come together and utilize this platform that you are heading, the US-India Business Council, to bring this entire initiative into implementation?
Well, we thought that through spotlighting the journey of these incredible leaders, that it would also provide mentorship and inspiration to a whole new generation of women who are entering the workforce to be able to navigate their own journey, to balance the choices that they have to make, and to really meet the aspiration and the potential that each of them have. So we're hoping that by spotlighting these women leaders, that we're also helping to nurture the next generation of women leaders.
Okay. I'll come back to it also, keeping in mind you are an Indian American and you're an Indian American woman and an extremely successful one at that. But I'll keep those questions to the latter part of the interview. But what I also want to understand from you is the position that you've held in terms of your vast experience in exploring the US-India trade ties, both under the Obama administration and now under the Biden administration. How do you see that this Indo-US ties are evolving here on in the current scenario?
The US-India Business Council was set up long before the US and India were actually doing any kind of business together. It was set up 46 years ago, and it was set up by then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and by his Indian counterpart, the Indian External Affairs Minister during the Indira Gandhi era. And it was set up with the notion that even if in that time we did not have a commercial or trade relationship, that we knew that we needed to anchor our partnership in strategic and security, but also in economic ties between our two countries. And we have seen the US-India trade relationship grow since then. We are now at 150 billion in two-way trade and investment. It's been growing nicely, but frankly, it is far, far under the potential of what the trade relationship of two of the world's largest economies should be. Mm-hmm. And so USIBC really has been focusing on how do we create the architecture of trade that can really usher in a much more robust partnership that will also then become another pillar in our overall strategic partnership. And that's really what USIBC has been focusing on, that we don't have a trade agreement between our two countries. We don't have a bilateral investment treaty between our two countries. Mm-hmm. Businesses have been bullish on India, and Indian businesses have been bullish on the United States, but they need the lubricant and the efficiency and efficacy that is ushered in when you have a trade agreement. And so that's what we're pushing for. And in the meantime, we hope to see a continuing convergence in our policies and approaches that will just help us increase trade.
Okay, that's interesting to note. Why do you feel that it has taken so many decades for India and United States to actually come forth with even the proposal of having a US-India agreement, trade agreement, economic agreement? We've taken a look at what is happening in the European counterpart, where something similar at this point of time is brewing. The European Union has been coming forth to build this trade ties with India, this trade agreement with India. Something similar that's happening with the United Kingdom now, and things are going to fall in place sooner rather than later. But any particular reasons that you feel since you've been in this arena for a long time, and the lack of an agreement and why it has taken us so long?
Well, there's probably two or three key reasons. One is, I think India, from its inception, from its birth and nationhood, turned a little bit inward to say, first, we want to build our own domestic economy before we're ready to let the world in. And so it had a more closed approach to global trade for many, many decades. That started to change when Manmohan Singh was finance minister, and you had the first set of big reforms, and India started liberalizing and opening up. And it has been a journey since then. But really, in the past several years, and really most particularly in the past several months, we've seen a much more ambitious stance from the Modi government towards opening up trade and towards striking bilateral trade agreements with the United States and with other countries. And I think partly India has come to realize that if it is going to be on the world stage, and if it is going to be competitive with the likes of China, it has got to play not just for its own markets, but for global markets. And you cannot create export-led growth if you do not have trade relationships with major partners. So I think that we've seen that journey, but trade is also very hard in democracies. It's hard in the United States, it's hard in India, because trade requires kind of reordering the economy, introducing efficiencies. It will displace some and create hopefully more opportunity than it displaces, but that is a tough political conversation to have. It is one that I think increasingly both governments are recognizing that they have to have, and we're here to help.
Okay. Then, it's a very dynamic geopolitical scenario post the pandemic that we are witnessing across the globe. There seem to be a lot of blocs that are at the time of formation, and perhaps not to the liking of the United States, or for that matter, when you bring in Russia, then there is sort of contentious ties that are building between United States and China, or for that matter, India and China. And the world at large has faced with this massive pandemic, this entire chaos that has been created. How do you then envisage the India-US relationships for global security, which is paramount at this time? And how is it that more can be done to further strategize it and strengthen it? And do you think that while India continues to be an ally of the United States and vice versa on various levels, be it strategic, economic, trade, trade ties that we have, but there are agreements and ties and relationships that India continues to harbor with other nations, which United States might not take liking to. How do we ensure that a bonhomie continues to remain between both the nations, especially when it comes to global security, which is a massive concern?
Well, first of all, I would say that the US and India have been converging our approaches and our aspirations over these past 2 or 3 decades, certainly 2 decades, I would say. And that has been evident in the trajectory of the strategic partnership between our two countries under former President Bush, under President Obama. Certainly we continue to see, despite many other challenges, continue to see the US-India convergence continue under President Trump and now under President Biden. In fact, Prime Minister Modi, in his first visit to the United States, talked about that growing convergence. And in his speech before the joint session of Congress, talked about overcoming the hesitations of history and creating that partnership, that natural alliance that the US and India have. But both countries also recognize that ours is a unique relationship, and one that allows for accommodation in both directions to different approaches. So that when India has a different relationship that it is trying to sustain with other countries in the region. I think you have seen the United States provide a degree of understanding and accommodation. And similarly, I think India has understood that the United States will not always see eye to eye on every matter. But
Right.
that's what partners and allies do, is that you anchor yourself on the main areas of convergence, and then you accommodate each other where you might have some slight differences.
Okay, fair enough. Another prickly point between the West and the Asian nations, particularly India and the United States, has been about climate change and sustainability. And the same was amply evident during the COP26 summit that had taken place. How best do you think can these differences be ironed out? And how can US and India work together to achieve it?
Well, look, I think that the major differences are really in kind of a expectation on differentiated roles and responsibilities based on, emission status and development status, et cetera, and on financing, climate financing. India has made robust commitments and really ambitious commitments on renewable energy, and India has also understood its own self-interest in creating a carbon neutral economy, in bringing in cleaner technology, and in safeguarding, its own environment. But India has also, stated that it needs the support not only for itself but other developing nations, of the developed nations, to bring in that modern technology, and it needs some time. The United States, I think, has understood that. We are, however, facing urgency in the climate crisis. And so while there is a great deal of understanding of how different countries approach it and what their own particulars are, exigencies are, there's also this urgency that we cannot wait another 20, 30, 40, 50 years to address the crisis, that it really has to be addressed in real time. Mm-hmm. And I think the US and India will actually be very close collaborators in ushering in the new technology and the opportunity that creates, not only for the climate, but also for the economy. So I think that there's going to be actually more collaboration than there is conflict on the US and India on climate.
Okay, so we've talked about trade, we've talked about climate and sustainability. So I would like to specifically understand from you, which are those particular spheres, arenas, sectors that can further burgeon our trade ties, our economic ties between both nations, between the United States and India. And also the fact that has the pandemic ended up becoming a blessing in disguise in view of a number of global supply chains at this point of time, in the process of shifting from one particular nation that has faced the ire of the entire world to those which are more conducive, which are more friendly, which are more open and democratic in terms of allowing for these plants, factories to set up base?
It's a great question, Megha. I would say, look, I don't think under any circumstances we can call this pandemic a blessing in the amount of suffering and dislocation that it has caused in India, in the United States, and around the world. But what the pandemic has done is underscore some of the vulnerabilities in our global supply chain. And it has underscored the importance of diversifying, of de-risking, and also of creating some trusted partnerships that can address critical needs at critical times. Mm-hmm. India has been a key anchor for the global response, in that India's ability to manufacture at scale needed diagnostics, therapeutics, and of course vaccines is a key part to how the whole world overcomes the pandemic. And already India has done so much to share its technology and to share its products with the world. The US and India, and frankly, even the Quad, have understood that that important role that India will play and is playing, and therefore have invested in scaling up India's capacity to produce these key life-saving products, vaccines and therapeutics, and getting them into the countries that need them. And so I think you're going to see that trend will continue. And then, even beyond the pharmaceutical space and the medical space, we've seen that supply chain bottlenecks imposed by lockdowns, by travel restrictions, by shutting down of factories in different places has required us to really rethink our supply chain ecosystem and to not over-rely on any one geography. And so companies are increasingly looking to get closer to their markets rather than in one location. And I think India can stand to benefit from that. But of course, it requires then a very sustained focus on creating that ecosystem. And that's something that we are working closely with the government in trying to bring about.
Okay. I'm going to shift my focus from trade ties between India and the United States to how you, as an Indian American, perceives the United States of America, and more importantly, how have the Americans perceived Indian Americans in the last decade or so? Has there been a concrete tilt in the perception of people living in the United States and the rest of the world when it comes to looking at Indians, the Indian diaspora in their respective regions?
Well, Indian Americans in the United States have really been woven into every aspect of our society, into the arts, into culture, into sports, science and technology, politics, and of course, business, and particularly technology. And so you've seen that in the prominence of so many Indian Americans, certainly in the business field with great leaders and pioneers like Indra Nooyi, Satya Nadella. We just are continuing to see so many others rise up in the business arena, Ajay Banga and many others. And of course, they have all also been part of the U.S.-India Business Council and the journey and the story of U.S.-India ties. And that, I think, will continue to be the case. But I think what the close ties between our nations reflects is that growing understanding and appreciation of a converging in our cultures, in our countries, that is reflected also in how Indian Americans are also just engaging in all aspects of American society, and increasingly Americans are viewing India because of the lens through which they view it, which is the colleagues and friends that they know in their own communities.
Absolutely. Are there still challenges to overcome for the Indian American community? How was it different back in the Obama administration and the Trump administration and now in the Biden administration? And you would know it so much better than a layman, keeping in mind that you have aggressively, consciously worked in this arena.
So I would say the Indian American community is emblematic of the larger immigrant community. And that is that there are certainly fissures in America and in American society, as there are increasingly in so many parts of the world, with some trends towards nationalism that can manifest in ways that disadvantage immigrant communities. By and large, America continues to be open, inclusive, and supportive. And so the Indian American community has really benefited from that. But it is something that I think we have to continue to advocate for and fight for, is to ensure that America continues to be open and inclusive and nurturing of all people of all different backgrounds, and then to make sure that, you know, we're supporting those same values around the world.
Okay. Are there any changes, alterations, modifications that are required in legislations that are then going to be for the positivity and welfare of the Indian community, or in a larger scope, we can say the South Asian community? Are there any actions that you are at this point of time as the senior vice president of the US State of Commerce are also taking forward proactively?
Well, certainly we continue to advocate at the Chamber for immigration policies that continue to bring the world's brightest, most talented people to our shores, you know, through our education system and through employment opportunities. We want to make sure that, you know, the benefits that we have reaped as a nation through the innovation, ingenuity, and hard work of the immigrants who've come to our shores, that we continue to do that. And that is something that the U.S. Chamber has understood. That is something that the business community has championed. And I think we continue to press for immigration reform that allows us to be able to attract the best and the brightest to come. And also, to bring opportunity for the scores around the world, including refugees that seek opportunity in our nation.
I thank you so much, Nisha, for joining me on this very special broadcast. I congratulate you and wish you all the very best for the first season of US-India Business Council Women Lead. Will be witness to you interacting with a number of women entrepreneurs, executives, who have accomplished so much in their lives, and of course their journeys, their stories, and how they in fact are able to influence a larger audience, women and men across the globe and in India. I thank you once again for being with us on NewsX.
Thank you so much, Megha, for your partnership and participation in this as well.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.